is considered leaky gut, and why is that important to understand?
Well, the reason it's important to understand is because many of us have digestive issues, and this is like gas or bloating or food sensitivities. And for many people, they actually start to get those later in life. So a lot of people are like, well, I used to be able to eat everything, and now all of a sudden I can't eat these certain foods, or I get really sensitive, or when I travel, there's certain things that they're going to make me feel really sick. And so that's why it's important to, all these like real life digestive issues that change your general happiness or your ability to eat a variety of foods really stem from a deficient gut microbiome. And what's happening there is actually a structural thing. And so when you think about like a wooden fence, you have all these wooden planks, they're held together by glue. You want to have a strong fence, which means you've got strong planks and strong glue. But what can happen over time is, through seasons and wear and tear, is that glue can start to thin and a plank can fall. Now you've got a hole in your fence. And that's a problem because all these things are coming in and out. Your neighbor can see you. That's not what you want. Your gut lining is structurally exactly the same. You have these planks, they're called epithelial cells, and you have this glue, it's called mucin. And if you don't have the right glue layer, like it starts to get too thin, literally you get these gaps in your gut lining. And those gaps are terrible because effectively all the things inside your intestines are now leaking into your bloodstream. And then all these things in your bloodstream are making their way into your intestines. And this is what people refer to as leaky gut. And that's what causes inflammation, digestive issues, foods you can't eat anymore. And there's one strain that we know of to date that can break down the old glue and replenish the glue, and it's called Akkermansia. And Akkermansia lives like at the fence, and all day long he just strips away the old glue and puts up the new glue. And most people, most adults, at some point become deficient or low in Akkermansia. And if they could just get it back into their system, they would now solve all these digestive issues.
But why adults? Why is the microbiome kind of breaking down as we age? Is that a function of aging? And because I know when I was a kid, I could eat anything that I wanted to. It'd never have any consequences. I could eat junk food, fried food all the time. But now if I do that, I do too much, just wreaks havoc on my gut. And is there something to do with aging? What are some other factors that could impact the gut lining?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not alone. Most people can remember a time where they could eat or drink whatever they wanted to, and there's like no repercussions. And then as you age, you're like, well, now I got to get this amount of sleep. Now I got to get this amount of hydration. Now I can't eat these foods, or I can't, do all the things that I used to do. And the fact is that there are so many studies, thousands of studies showing that the depletion of the microbiome is something that happens over time. And that depletion is linked to losing these things that can, deal with the gut lining, these things that can perform all these different metabolic functions. And so the two biggest things that we have control over that change our microbiomes are, number one, antibiotics. So if you've ever taken an antibiotic, and we all have, antibiotics are like a nuclear bomb to your microbiome. They literally are there to kill bacteria. And so a lot of times, if you think about it like a garden where you have like all these fruits and vegetables and flowers in this garden you've been pruning and taking care of, and you're like, oh my God, a weed, and you just threw bleach all over the whole garden. That's what an antibiotic is like. You've just killed everything in there and decimated it. And then what's going to grow back kind of becomes a different thing than necessarily what you planted in the first place. And so antibiotics are one of the biggest ways that you change your microbiome. And a lot of people don't recover the right microbiome after that. And the second biggest thing that affects your microbiome is your nutrition, the food that you eat. And so if, let's say, you're a carnivore and you decide, well, I'm going to become a vegetarian, within 4 to 8 weeks, you've entirely changed all the different microbes that are in there. Because remember, they live inside you, and so what you eat is literally their food. It's what feeds them. You have complete control over who lives and who dies based on your diet. So those are the two biggest things. You're taking antibiotics, and your nutrition affects your microbiome. Now, there's a bunch of stuff you don't have control over that also can cause your microbiome to become depleted. Simply aging causes our microbiome to become depleted. When we go through periods of intense stress, that causes our microbiomes to become depleted. When we travel and our circadian rhythm gets messed up, night becomes day, day becomes night, that causes your microbiome to become depleted. When you go through hormonal changes, so like when women go through menopause, your microbiome becomes depleted. So there's all these things that you don't really have control over that are causing the ongoing depletion of your microbiome. And that's why overall, as we age, because you will have had more chances to take antibiotics, you will have certainly experienced stress, travel, all of these things cause our microbiome to become depleted. And now that shows up for us in reduced functions. We can't eat or drink everything that we wanted to because now the body can't metabolize it.
Okay, well, if those factors, there's a lot of factors that we can't control. And if we can't control, taking antibiotics and our nutrition, if we were rebuilding our gut, let's say I take a whack load of antibiotics. Actually, when I was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I had strep throat, I think 4 or 5 times in 1 year. And the doctor just said, you need to get rid of this. You can't, it's hard to get rid of on your own. So you need to go on a lot of antibiotics. And so I found after that, I think my gut got absolutely destroyed. I would find, this may be TMI, but like undigested food a lot in my stool. And if I were to rebuild my gut, starting from nothing, starting from an empty playing field, and now I'm like starting to build a sports team, how can I build my gut as powerfully as possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I just want to maybe emphasize that I'm not an antibioticer. Like people, there are situations where you've got a bacterial infection, where you should definitely take antibiotics. So don't turn your doctor down. It's just don't ask for it unless your doctor's telling you need it. And maybe one more piece of information about antibiotics and chronic antibiotic use. There was a great study that came out in 2012 that was subsequently repeated by the Mayo Clinic where Marty Blaser showed that babies who were on a lot of antibiotics were subsequently more obese later on in life. And the Mayo Clinic showed that if you're under 2 years old and you're on a lot of antibiotics, later on in life, you're not only more prone to obesity and diabetes, but you're also more prone to allergies, asthma, ADHD, celiac disease. And so this early detriment to your microbiome and doing it over and over again, in a lot of ways, it's unrecoverable. And if we hone in on the obesity thing and metabolism thing for a second, this is something that farmers have actually been using for a long time. They feed their cattle antibiotics. Why are they feeding them antibiotics? Because they noticed that when they gave them antibiotics over and over again, the cattle started to gain weight. And so that's great. If you're a farmer, you're like, okay, now my same cow is twice as big. The problem is, as a human, we're not really looking for that. And why is that? It's because when you take these antibiotics and it completely decimates your microbiome, your body is basically like, well, that was terrible. When we rebuild our microbiome, we better build a microbiome that is going to absorb calories, that's going to keep us as healthy as possible. This is like getting back to caveman days of the guy who survived was the one who knew how to hold on to all their calories and fat. Of course, in today's world, that's not the microbiome any of us really want. So we want the one that's like, get rid of all of it. And so the downside of these antibiotics is that the microbiome that you get afterwards, if you kind of don't do anything proactive about it, is more likely to be one that's going to cause you problems because it's going to try to absorb calories to keep you healthy. And so how can you select for microbes that actually help you metabolize your foods better? It gets back to the foods that you eat. And so going after these, back to the produce section, high fiber, high polyphenol foods. And by the way, polyphenols can be found in other things besides the produce section. So spices. So if you like using lots of spices in your food, you should keep doing that because spices carry polyphenols. Green tea is a great source of polyphenols. Red wine, dark chocolates. Nice. These are also good sources of polyphenols. So, some fun places you can get them from. But effectively, if you are on an antibiotic or you're about to go on to an antibiotic, it's really helpful to start supplementing with probiotics that are, you want to look for things that produce butyrate. You're going to want to look for Akkermansia because that's the guy that you definitely want to make sure you've got, the guy who's at the fence all day long. And you'll want to eat foods that are high in fibers and polyphenols. That is the best thing to do. And by the way, if you're an intermittent faster, same thing too. What you break your fast with, the first food you eat, the first foods you eat, that's what you should be targeting as well, these high fiber, high polyphenol foods.
Let's say you were sick, you haven't gone to see your doctor yet. Could you, and that antibiotics are going to wipe out your colony of all your bacteria. Could you go into it with like high fiber diet, like first? Could you prep ahead of time and then get them wiped out and come back a bit stronger as you start to rebuild that? Or is there a way to kind of prepare before you get wiped out?
Yeah, it's the short answer is yes. Like, and actually I would say maybe at a higher level, when people say like, oh, what does it mean to have a healthy gut microbiome? What are the strains I have to have a healthy gut? I think the right question is, what is a healthy gut microbiome? It's not about which strains. It's about what are you looking for? And what you're looking for is a resilient gut microbiome. And that means that when you take an antibiotic, you are resilient to it. You're not going to end up with all these chronic illnesses on the other side. And so what can you do to build a resilient gut microbiome is you can be eating these foods. And actually, people used to ask me like, oh, should I take a probiotic with my antibiotic? And I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Your antibiotic is killing your probiotic. But there have actually been a couple of really well-done studies showing that if you are taking a probiotic and then you start an antibiotic, yes, the antibiotic does still decimate things, but there's something about having taken that probiotic and eaten those good foods and had that good nutrition that makes your microbiome more resilient. So on the other side of that antibiotic, you're actually building back up these, desirable microbiome more than other people. So yeah, the thing to do to prep is in general, you should always try to have a good diet. And then you might even want to be deliberately, supplementing before you go on to an antibiotic.